I want this human. Mom. The alien vampire princess wanted to marry the human warrior. A soft, eerie hum filled the throne hall of Virelia as the royal blood crystals pulsed with anticipation. The ceiling shimmered with shifting constellations, a simulated sky meant to mimic the one visible from the ancient vampire homeworld, now long consumed by a binary star implosion. Holographic tapestries danced gently in the artificial air, depicting generations of brooding royalty in elegant murder poses, each of them looking suspiciously like they just finished reading Nietzsche and devouring a goat. Seraphine stood at the center of it all, chin high, boots polished to an almost offensive shine, an expression unreadable except for the flicker in her eyes. The kind of flicker that made diplomats sweat and courtiers pretend to check their neural implants. Her long ears, a hereditary trait of her mother's bloodline, twitched once in irritation. The coronation chamber was too hot, or maybe she was. And so by the decree of the Council of Houses, by the blood of the ancients, and by the honor of the Empress, Lisava the Undying, may her cheekbones remain forever sharp, we present to you Prince Valor of House Synth, the chosen mate of our crown princess. Polite applause. Bored applause. One noble in the back clapped with actual enthusiasm, only to be elbowed by his spouse. Valor stepped forward like he was modeling for a calendar titled Dangerously Eligible. Gleaming white armor hugged his physique like it had been poured on. His fangs were on perfect display, which was saying something, since they were platinum-capped and faintly bioluminescent. He bowed just deep enough to suggest reverence, but not so deep he risked his hair losing shape. "It is my deepest pleasure," he said, voice like aged velvet, "to pledge myself to the princess and strengthen our bloodlines in a union that will—" "I want this human, Mom." The words hit the hall like an asteroid, not metaphorically. Somewhere above them, a navigation AI got distracted by the declaration and veered a freighter slightly off course into the moon's lower atmosphere. Empress Lysava did not blink. She didn't even breathe. She merely turned her head inch by imperious inch toward her daughter. "You want what now?" "This human," Seraphine repeated calmly now, with that deceptive stillness of someone about to press a very large, very red button. "Cade, the one we captured during the last raid. The one who punched Captain Griv and called your battle strategy adorably medieval. That one." A murmur erupted across the chamber. Someone audibly gasped. A court gossip drone whirred closer to get a better angle. Valor stared, lips parted. "You mean the snack? He has a name." "Yes," said Lisava slowly, like the word itself might break her teeth. "A human name, which I must remind you begins with a monosyllable and ends with a statistical lifespan of less than a century. He also has excellent shoulders," Seraphine added, "and he made me laugh. Once. On purpose." Silence. And then, from the shadows, "Lisava, I believe your daughter may have sustained head trauma." "Shut up, Uncle Drezik," Seraphine snapped. "You still think gravity is a conspiracy?" The Queen rose. "No need for theatrics." The gravity in the throne hall adjusted automatically to give her a more menacing height differential. Her eyes glowed faintly violet, not out of rage, but because she'd upgraded her ocular implants for extra drama years ago. "Seraphine, you are to be Empress. You will have dominion over 6 systems, rule a people descended from the night itself, and uphold the ancient code of survival and sovereignty." "Yes, and? You cannot mate with a human." "Why not?" "They're fragile, sticky. They excrete loudly. They use idioms. Their bones break under moonlight. And worst of all, they watch entertainment shows involving baking and betrayal." "I'm aware. I like all of those things." Lisava sighed in the way only an immortal could, like she had personally watched stars be born and die, and still found this more exhausting. "We have bred for eons to maintain the purity of our genetic line. And it's so boring," Seraphine said. "Everyone here glows, broods, and monologues. Cade insulted my boots within the first 30 seconds of captivity. Do you know how refreshing that is?" From the shadows a voice called, "To be fair, those boots are extremely—" "Don't finish that sentence, Uncle Drezik." Valor stepped forward again. trying his best to recover the mood with a grin that might have once melted hearts but now just looked like he was preparing to endorse a brand of synthetic fangs. Princess, perhaps you are simply enamored by novelty. Humans are quaint, like antique blasters, or moss. Prince Valor, she said sweetly, you once tried to seduce my cousin with a limerick involving blood viscosity. Kindly stop talking before I develop an allergy to your face. The queen pinched the bridge of her nose, which took effort, because her nails were a legally classified weapon. Very well. If you truly desire this, Cade, then you will invoke the ordeal of thorns. Let your chosen survive it, and the court will have no choice but to acknowledge your claim. There was a hush, the kind that always followed when someone uttered the name of a ritual designed by ancient beings who thought compassion was a design flaw. Seraphine lifted her chin. Done. You understand what that means, child? I do. And if he dies? Seraphine's lips curved into a smile, thin and dangerous. Then at least I'll know he died trying, which is more than I can say for half this room. Somewhere beneath the throne hall, deep in the dungeon capsules, Cade sneezed, then groaned, then muttered, Someone's talking about me again. I told them I'm allergic to court politics. He didn't yet know that the fate of 2 civilizations now rested on his stubborn shoulders, or that in a matter of hours he'd be facing a labyrinth of illusions, bioweaponized poetry, and at least one creature that resembled his high school algebra teacher. But he did know one thing. I still hate these boots. Cade sat with his back against the energy-dampened wall of Cell Block C, his legs stretched out across the cold metal floor, staring up at the flickering light strip above him like it owed him money. His wrists were bound in energy cuffs which buzzed every few seconds just to remind him he was very, very imprisoned. Okay, he said to the light, real talk. If one more drop of fluorescent juice falls on my face, I swear I will declare war on space ceilings. All of them. The cell was barely big enough to stretch in and smelled faintly of burnt garlic and pride. Across from him, the door pulsed with a biometric lock that required a 10-digit blood code and probably an emotional confession. Cade had spent the last hour trying to hack it using a spoon he'd smuggled from breakfast and a surprisingly effective theory involving misquoted Shakespeare. So far, the door had only mocked him with what sounded suspiciously like a synthetic yawn. Jail's just spa day with more voltage, he muttered, and worse room service. He had a fresh bruise blooming across his jaw from the last guard who'd thought it'd be funny to test his fragility. Cade had headbutted him in return, which was less effective than he'd hoped, mostly because the guard had an exoskeletal forehead. Still, small victories. Then the door hissed. He looked up, expecting another guard, or perhaps a bucket of experimental leeches. They'd hinted about that at lunch. But instead, in walked Seraphine, in full regalia. Her armor gleamed with black gold inlays, tailored to slice shadows when she moved. Her long ears flicked slightly as she stepped inside, the door sealing behind her with a whisper like it was trying not to get involved. Well, well, Cade drawled. If it isn't Queen Dracula, Galactic Edition. Seraphine raised a brow. That would make me my own grandmother, which is biologically confusing and historically inaccurate. Cade grinned. Yeah, I'm good at those. She didn't sit, merely examined the cell with mild distaste, as though the walls offended her decor sensibilities. I had them install extra dampening fields. You're lucky. That's high-budget containment. I feel honored, really. It's like being a VIP, but the I stands for inmate. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, and that was dangerous, Cade realized. Not because it was sharp or predatory, though yes, but because it was real. You've been selected, she said. For what? Galactic Bachelor? She folded her arms. The ordeal of thorns. He blinked. Ah, that's not a spa package, is it? It's a trial. Well, obviously, anything with ordeal in the title isn't exactly light entertainment. If you survive, we have legal precedent to make the court recognize our bond, she continued. Even the Queen can't deny it. Cade stared at her for a moment, processing. Wait, hold on. Our bond, as in, you told your murder vampire space mom you want to marry me? She was very upset. Oh, I bet she was. He rubbed a hand over his face. Lady, I called your general a glorified vending machine and broke your palace's fish tank. They were war eels, she corrected, and they deserved it. He looked at her, really looked, the way you do when you realize someone might be just as crazy as you are, only prettier and possibly stronger. You're serious. I don't waste my time on jokes. That's your specialty. Cade leaned his head back against the wall. So, what is this ordeal of thorns? You said it's a trial. What kind? Obstacle course? Gladiator match? Endless bureaucracy? A little of everything. It's a psionic labyrinth generated by an ancient Ilari core. He blinked. Ilari? Those extinct psychic squid things? Yes, very stylish, very unstable. The trial feeds on your mind, your fears, your memories, your insecurities. It creates personalized challenges. To survive, you must conquer your own weaknesses. That sounds healthy, he paused. Also terrifying, but mostly healthy. If you survive, they can't deny you. If you die, well, I suppose we go back to Valor and his excessively shiny cheekbones. Cade groaned. Don't tempt me to fake my death. She stepped closer then, and the room felt smaller. Not because of her height or the armor, but because of her eyes. Something ancient behind them. Something that had seen galaxies burn and still found humor in his dumb jokes. I'm not asking you to win for the court, she said quietly. I'm asking you to fight because I chose you. Because when you made fun of my boots, I didn't want to kill you. And that was new. Cade stared. That's your love language? Yes, mockery and selective mercy. He exhaled. All right, fine, I'll do it. But if I die in a maze made of my own trauma, I'm going to haunt you. You wouldn't be the first. The cuffs released with a hiss and she turned to leave. Wait, he called. What happens if I pass? She didn't look back. Then we make history, and possibly kiss in front of 1,000 scandalized nobles. Cool, he muttered. No pressure. Later, escorted by guards who looked one coffee away from going full cyborg, Cade was led through the inner sanctum of the palace toward the trial chamber. The door loomed ahead, a black monolith with a single eye in the center, rotating slowly. The AI guarding it spoke. Welcome, Subject Cade. Do you accept the terms of the ordeal of thorns? He scratched his neck. Do I get a safety word? Negative, but you may scream banana for dramatic effect. Works for me. The door slid open, revealing a swirling void. He took one last breath, muttered something about regretting every decision since breakfast, and stepped inside. The void whispered, and Cade whispered back, Bring it on, psychic squid maze. I've survived worse. He had, but the maze didn't care. It was already watching. Cade landed hard on something that felt like a carpet made of nightmares and old chewing gum. He groaned as the void around him dissolved into color, shape, and inconveniently loud sound. For a moment he wondered if the ordeal had simply launched him into an alien nightclub from the year 3020, but then a pair of whispering trees tried to sell him insurance, and he realized, no, this was definitely a hallucination. The sky above him pulsed in hues no human eye should be able to perceive, which didn't stop his brain from helpfully describing it as mildly nauseating grape with a side of existential dread. He stood, dusted himself off, and turned in a slow circle. The landscape shifted as he looked at it, refusing to settle. Mountains melted into meadows. Meadows turned into libraries where the books stared back. And in the distance, a tower spun endlessly upward, its base nowhere, and its top somewhere behind the moon's emotional baggage. Okay, Cade muttered. Either this is the trial maze or I've been trapped inside a prog rock album cover. A voice echoed around him. It wasn't loud, but it had the distinct quality of being everywhere at once and judging his fashion choices. Initiating level 1. Psychological mapping complete. Welcome, Cade Renner. Your first challenge, regret. Ugh, he said. Of course. Why not start with the fun stuff? The landscape shifted again, this time hard and fast. The ground cracked, a tremor running beneath his feet like an irritated earthworm. Shapes rose from the dust, and Cade squinted until they clarified. 3 figures. All versions of him. One in military uniform, sharp and decorated, with blood on his collar. Another in civilian clothes, hair too clean, a hopeful glint in his eye, fresh out of basic, probably still believed in authority. The third was bruised, eyes dark, with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Great, Cade said. My own personal regret committee. The Cade in uniform stepped forward, arms crossed. You remember the mission on Kirev 9? The one where you hesitated and they died? I also remember the part where Command gave us wrong intel. Cade shot back. That hesitation still costs time. Time costs lives. Hopeful Cade looked at the ground. I thought we were heroes. Shaky Cade whispered, We're broken. Cade looked at them, all of them, and sighed. You guys rehearsed this, huh? Uniform Cade didn't blink. What are you going to do about it? Honestly? Cade scratched his head. Probably make a joke. Deflect emotionally. Power through with sarcasm. Maybe punch something. Hopeful Cade looked up. What if that's not enough? Cade smiled, just a little. Then I keep trying anyway. The three figures shimmered. The ground beneath them cracked open, swallowing them in a burst of blue-white light. Level 1. Complete. Progressing to Layer 2. Challenge. Identity. Oh, come on, Cade said as the world melted again. Can't I just fight a space bear or something? This time he landed in a room. Not a dreamscape, not a battlefield. Just his bedroom, back on Earth. The posters were still on the wall. Old sci-fi movies, rock bands, and that one motivational quote that made sense at the time, and now just felt deeply ironic. Be the hero of your own story, he read aloud. Right, tell that to the alien labyrinth. The bed creaked behind him. He turned. Sitting there was his mother. Not his actual mother. This version glitched around the edges, as if reality couldn't quite remember how she looked. But the eyes were right. Warm, sad, tired. You always ran from yourself, she said, even when you were little. You built walls before you even knew why you were building them. I didn't think I needed to be analyzed by hologram mom today, he replied. Pretty sure I signed a waiver. She smiled. Then why did you come here? To prove something, to survive. Number, that's the excuse. What's the reason? He looked down, his fists clenched. Because she believed in me. Who? You know who. A pause. The bed disappeared. The walls cracked. The floor dropped. He fell, spinning through a storm of images. His childhood, training days, battlefield screams, the flash of Seraphine's eyes when she smiled at his awful jokes. The voice returned. Layer 2 complete. Commencing final layer. Fear. This time the world was silent. Too silent. He stood on a black platform in endless dark. No stars, no walls, just one door. Free-floating, slowly creaking open. Cade stepped forward. Inside was nothing. Just a mirror. He approached it warily. His reflection didn't move with him. Instead, it smiled. Then it stepped out. Mirror Cade was taller, bulkier, eyes glowing faintly blue with that unnatural clarity that screamed, enhanced. He wore armor Cade didn't recognize. Alien tech fused with something sleek and imperial. I'm what you could have been, the reflection said. If you'd taken the enhancements, if you'd accepted their offer. No weakness, no pain, just power. And no humanity, Cade replied. Mirror Cade sneered. You cling to weakness and call it soul. That's why you lose. That's why she'll die loving a man who was never good enough. Cade moved fast. His punch landed first. The fight was brutal. Mirror Cade didn't tire, didn't joke, fought like a machine designed to win. Cade bled a little, laughed a lot, which only made the reflection angrier. Finally, he caught Mirror Cade's arm, twisted and smashed him into the platform. I'm not perfect, he panted, but I'm real, and she chose me. Not you, not the upgraded fantasy. Me. The mirror shattered. Light surged around him. Final layer complete. Trial successful. Candidate alive. Cade collapsed to his knees, laughing. Then he yelled, "Banana!" just for good measure. The void dissolved, and Seraphine stood at the exit, arms crossed, looking relieved and trying not to show it. Took you long enough, she said. You should see the other me, he groaned. Behind her, nobles and generals gathered, shocked. Whispers rippled through the court like static. But Seraphine stepped forward, took Cade's hand, and turned to face them all. "I choose him." The queen narrowed her eyes. The court exploded. Cade leaned closer and whispered, "You owe me a drink, and maybe an exorcism." She smiled. "You earned both." Cade sat in a throne. Technically, it was more of a decorative space perch made of polished obsidian, laced with plasma veins that glowed when someone of royal blood got moody, which was apparently often, judging by how bright the thing was pulsing under Seraphine. She sat beside him on her own throne, one leg crossed over the other, looking like a queen who had absolutely no time for nonsense and possibly less time for formal dinners. They were in the Hall of Ascension, a name Cade thought sounded more like a cult gym than a royal venue, but the architecture was incredible. Massive archways made of star steel, suspended gravity lanterns that shimmered in impossible colors, a ceiling that shifted to reflect the galactic sky in real time. It was like sitting in the eye of a particularly fashionable wormhole. The nobles were still talking, loudly. "He's a human, Your Majesty. A Terran soldier, not even a hybrid." This violates at least 8 articles of the Blood Compact, 9 if you count the footnote. Cade leaned toward Seraphine and whispered, "Should I be flattered or worried that I apparently violate a legal document just by breathing?" She didn't look at him. "You'd violate more if you started talking." "Oh, excellent," Cade said. "My specialty." One of the nobles, this one with ears so long they curled like expensive antennae, stood and slammed his gloved fist on the ceremonial table. "This is an outrage, a political circus. He is beneath the dignity of the throne." Cade stood up slowly, brushing imaginary dust off his borrowed ceremonial tunic. "Actually, I checked. I'm about 5 centimeters taller than it, so technically I'm above the dignity of the throne." A horrified gas spread through the room, like perfume sprayed over a funeral. Seraphine sighed. "This is what I warned you about." "You said be myself," he said. "This is myself, but cleaner." Queen Nisara had remained silent until now. She sat at the highest seat, watching Cade as though she was deciding whether to sentence him to exile, execution, or marriage counseling. Her gaze could have curdled milk, galactic milk, from cows that hadn't evolved yet. At last she rose. Every voice dropped like someone had hit mute on the room. "The ordeal of thorns has been passed. That cannot be undone," the queen said, voice calm and cold. "But that does not mean we must accept this union without scrutiny." Cade raised a hand. "Do I get a say in this scrutiny, or is it more of a watch and be threatened kind of thing?" Nisara ignored him. "A trial of bonding must be performed. The rite of syzygy." Cade blinked. "That sounds like something that ends in fire." Or syllables. Seraphine turned her head toward him. "It's traditional and painful." "Oh, wonderful. Can't wait. Is there a waiver?" The queen continued. "You will undergo a fusion trial, mental, emotional, and, briefly, biological." Cade frowned. "Define briefly." The court chuckled. It wasn't kind. Seraphine reached over and squeezed his hand under the table. Her fingers were colder than usual. Later in the preparation chamber, Cade stood shirtless in front of a mirror, while a small droid buzzed around his head, sewing gold-threaded sigils into his skin using a laser needle and what felt suspiciously like passive aggression. "Stop flinching," the droid said. "It ruins the symmetry." "You're stabbing me with hot magic spaghetti," Cade snapped. "Excuse me for being sensitive." "You have over 300 scars," the droid said flatly. "I fail to see the problem." "That's because you don't have nerve endings," he growled. Seraphine stepped in, dressed in ceremonial armor that shimmered like a supernova on vacation. She frowned at his bare chest. "Is that symbol crooked?" she asked. "Don't encourage the droid," Cade muttered. "You're almost ready," she said. "Then we'll step into the synchronization prism." "Great. I always wanted to step into something with prism in the name. Very secure, very safe." She walked over, touched one of the golden symbols, and it glowed briefly under her fingers. "This part of the rite is about resonance," she said softly. "We open our minds, feel each other's thoughts. No hiding, no lies." "Okay," he said. "But, just a heads up. I once thought an entire battle strategy through using burrito metaphors. I'll survive, she said. They entered the prism chamber together. The air inside was dense with charged particles, like standing inside a thundercloud's daydream. Crystalline walls closed behind them, and a low hum started, deep and ancient. The droid's voice echoed from outside. Begin mental fusion in 3, 2. Light exploded. Cade felt his thoughts unravel, threads pulled from his brain like silk, twisting through the air and into hers. Images flooded his mind. Her first battle, her lonely childhood, the terror of being powerful but never safe. In return, she saw his memories. Earth's crumbling skies, the day he lost his unit. The first time he looked at her and thought, God help me, she's incredible. The prism pulsed harder. Their breaths synced. Their heartbeats adjusted. Then the biological phase began. Cade yelped. Why do I feel like I'm being turned into a smoothie? Because you are, Seraphine replied. Their blood samples mixed in midair, dancing in a double helix before merging into a burst of violet plasma. Outside, the court watched in stunned silence. Inside, Cade felt her fear, her strength, her ridiculous internal monologue about how dumb his haircut was. I like my haircut, he thought. She smirked. I know. The prism dimmed. The process ended. Cade slumped slightly. Okay, that was, intimate. Did you just feel my teenage angst phase? I'm going to need therapy, Seraphine said. The queen stepped forward. They are bonded, she declared, by ancient right and modern recklessness. Cade raised a hand weakly. Do I get a certificate? The queen ignored him. He turned to Seraphine and grinned. So, still want to marry me? Or did the burrito metaphors ruin it? She hesitated, then kissed him. Fierce, fast, and entirely royal. The court gasped. Cade's only response was, guess that's a yes. The palace smelled like ozone and expensive disapproval. Cade was still getting used to the floating walkways, those stupidly elegant strips of anti-grav flooring that reacted to a person's emotional state and flickered accordingly. It was hard to look dignified when the floor pulsed lavender every time he felt nervous. He shuffled beside Seraphine as she swept down the corridor like a solar flare, wrapped in velvet, trailed by attendants with clipboards, data pads, and the distinct look of people afraid to breathe too loudly near royalty. So, Cade whispered, leaning toward her as they passed a statuesque guard whose armor looked like it had eaten 3 other sets of armor for breakfast. When do I get one of those capes that flutters dramatically even when there's no wind? Seraphine didn't look at him. Once you learn not to trip on your own boots. I do that for dramatic effect. You do it because you keep tying the laces wrong. Human laces are an art, he said. Yours are just weird magnetic clasp things. No romance. No suspense. No knots, she said, which is why we conquered 6 systems while you were still arguing with your footwear. The hall opened into the Chamber of Echoes, a high-level strategic briefing room where reality took a smoke break and let light bounce around in very creative ways. Projectors spun from the ceiling like gleaming insects, casting a 3-dimensional map of the sector above a conference table that resembled a galaxy had just fallen asleep on a slab of obsidian. Waiting for them was General Vorth, a man, or possibly a species of sentient granite, who had the build of a collapsed star and the personality of a tax auditor. His eyes flicked toward Cade and immediately downgraded him to biological inconvenience. We're under threat, Vorth said, in the tone of someone who found threats more irritating than dangerous. Oh, good, Cade muttered. I was just thinking we didn't have enough problems. Seraphine motioned toward the map. Show him. The projection spun, then zoomed into a swath of contested space near the glimmering divide. Cade recognized it, a lawless zone, full of old wrecks, pirate dens, and exactly 0 good places to grab a drink. We received this transmission last night, Vorth said. A voice crackled into existence, metallic, distorted, but somehow smug. I bring a gift, the death of your bloodline. The human is the key. Deliver him or watch your throne rot from within. Okay, Cade said. First of all, who records evil messages anymore? Very dramatic, very retro. They hijacked a royal beacon, Seraphine said, encrypted using old tongue protocols. That takes power. Or really aggressive tech support. Vorth turned to him slowly. This isn't a joke, Terran. Your existence has triggered a challenge not just to her reign, but to the entire balance of dynastic control. Right, but have you considered that I'm not trying to break galactic politics? Cade offered. I'm more of a happy accident. Seraphine's jaw tightened. The voice belongs to Lord Intaris, a blooded exile. He was denied the throne decades ago after failing the ordeal. Failing the same trial I just passed, Cade said, rubbing his chin. So this is, what? Alien vampire jealousy? It's more than that, Seraphine said. He claims ancestral rights, twisted by old law. If he defeats you, he claims my hand and the crown. Cade blinked. I knew the dating scene was competitive, but this is next level. Vorth stepped forward. You will not fight him. I'm sorry, do I get a vote? You are an unenhanced human soldier, Vorth said, stone-faced. He is a genetically augmented noble, trained in psychic war arts and blade forms we outlawed for being too lethal to spectators. Sounds fair. You will not win. I've been told that before, Cade said, then paused. Admittedly, not by people who have stat sheets on my enemies. Seraphine touched his arm. You don't have to do this. He turned to her, surprised. That's not the royal decree I was expecting. I want you alive, not symbolic. I appreciate that, but he made this about us, about what we are. I'm not going to hide while someone with glowing eyeballs tries to erase you just to spite a choice we both made. Seraphine sighed. You're stubborn and underqualified, but mostly stubborn. Preparations began at once. The duel, of course, had to be ritualized, held in the arena of glass beneath the twin moons of Vidian Prime. A location that sounded poetic until Cade learned the glass referred to superheated sand turned into reflective death during an ancient bombardment. Romantic, he muttered as he adjusted the ceremonial armor, a fusion of his old combat suit and alien regalia. Nothing says wedding prelude like murder in a heat mirror. The night of the duel, the arena buzzed with tens of thousands of spectators. The air shimmered from shielded atmosphere fields, and the moons cast eerie light that made every movement look epic whether you meant it or not. Intaris descended from his own platform like a comet with opinions. Tall, angular, his armor pulsing with forbidden runes, he looked every bit the interstellar supervillain Cade would have rooted against in a Saturday morning hollow serial. Human, he called, voice amplified and oozing disdain. You stand before the rightful heir. What will you do when I reduce you to memory? Cade drew his blade. It wasn't fancy. It hummed with Terran grit, military standard issue, duct tape on the hilt. Well, he said, first I'll try not to scream too much. The audience laughed. Some even cheered. Then Intaris lunged. Blades clashed. Sparks sang. Psychic waves rippled through the arena, distorting vision and thought. Cade dodged, ducked, rolled. Not graceful, but effective. He fought like a man with nothing to prove but everything to protect. Indarus sneered mid-swing. You love her, Cade parried. Didn't realize we were doing a relationship quiz mid-duel. You think that's enough? It's why I'm still standing. He landed a hit, not deep, but enough to draw Ecor. Intaris howled. The crowd gasped. Cade took a step back, breathing hard, sweat in his eyes, blood in his mouth, but still upright. You cannot defeat Bloodline, Intaris snarled. I don't need to, Cade said. I just need to remind her she gets to choose. And then as the moons aligned, the arena's reflective floor lit up, projecting Seraphine's image above them both. She stood, spoke. I choose him, Cade smirked. I really need that cape now. Cade wasn't entirely sure how he'd won. He remembered falling, then rolling, then punching someone who was technically a living weapon with the equivalent of a glorified kitchen knife. There had been fire, or light, or maybe just his vision shorting out because Intaris hit like a meteor with personal grievances. But somehow, at the end of it all, Cade had been the one still standing, mostly, leaning heavily on his sword, blood trickling from his lip, his ribs protesting like they'd unionized. Intaris had collapsed in a heap of regal failure, still twitching, one arm bent at a deeply unnatural angle. And when Cade had looked up, dazed and coated in equal parts sweat and someone else's hemoglobin, he'd seen Seraphine standing in the royal box, her expression unreadable. The silence had been cosmic, vast, infinite. And then, like a switch had been flipped across the stars themselves, the crowd roared. Now, 3 hours later, Cade sat in what someone had optimistically labeled a healing chamber. Really, it was a glorified tube that hummed judgmentally while he floated in purple gel that smelled vaguely like lavender and war crimes. His left foot had gone numb, possibly his right kidney too. "Are you sure this stuff is safe?" he asked, bubbles erupting from his mouth like a confused jacuzzi. A medical droid whirred nearby. "Your body is receiving regenerative stimulation calibrated to royal duel parameters. Please do not speak or flail." "I'm not flailing, I'm objecting." "Object silently." The door to the chamber hissed open. Seraphine stepped in, still in her ceremonial armor, though her expression had softened from regal wrath to something approximating worried fondness. She stopped just inside the room and regarded the floating mess of Cade. "You look terrible." He raised a gel-covered hand and wiggled his fingers. "Thanks. I was going for galactic stew." She stepped closer, arms crossed. "You fought like a lunatic." "Is that royal speak for bravely?" "No," she said. "It's royal speak for, what were you thinking? Fighting a psionic warlord with unresolved maternal issues and 3 knives hidden in his armor?" Cade sighed, letting the gel cradle his head. "I was thinking, hey, maybe if I get stabbed enough, people will stop challenging us to knife fights over our relationship." Seraphine rolled her eyes and tapped a rune on the wall. The gel began to drain, leaving Cade slowly rotating like a very confused rotisserie chicken. He was ejected onto a soft platform with a gentle squelch. "Ugh," he groaned, lying there. "Tell me we're not going to make ritual combat a tradition. I barely survived this one." "I had to fend off 3 assassination attempts while you were healing," she said casually, handing him a towel. "2 by drone, 1 by a very aggressive fruit basket." He blinked. "Please tell me the basket was sentient." "Number just poisoned," but the melon was insultingly overripe. Cade sat up slowly, toweling off goo. "So what now? Is there a honeymoon suite? Or do we have to dodge more nobility with pointy objections?" She paused, serious. "The court is divided. You've won the right. My declaration stands. But Antares' supporters aren't giving up. There's talk of invoking the archive clause." "Okay," he said cautiously. "That sounds either like a very dusty book club or a galaxy-sized lawsuit. The clause allows a secondary review, not legal, not martial, historical. They want to test whether our union aligns with recorded destiny." He squinted. "We're being judged by ancient prophecy?" Seraphine nodded. "They'll summon the archivists and access the Nebula Codex." Cade groaned. "Why can't we just go on a date like normal people? Maybe dinner, a hoverbike ride. I promise not to crash into any monuments." "Normal people don't marry vampire royalty on the eve of political collapse." "Point taken." 2 days later, they stood inside the Celestial Vault, an impossibly vast chamber located beneath the capital's core moon. It was maintained by the archivists, bizarre, ancient beings made entirely of translucent logic and bad social skills. Floating shapes of light with voices like wind chimes, suffering from mood swings. "The Codex reveals," one intoned, "that the future of the Blood Throne hinges on a paradox of love and ruin." Cade leaned toward Seraphine. "Do they always talk like fortune cookies?" "Worse," she whispered. "They think in riddles." Another archivist rotated midair. "The path splits. One leads to extinction, the other to evolution. Both are entwined in the human anomaly." Cade raised a hand. "Hi, anomaly here. Can I get that last part in, say, less cryptic?" The archivist pulsed. "You are a variable not accounted for, a glitch in dynastic probability. Your presence rewrites ancestral algorithms." Seraphine frowned. "But does the Codex approve?" There was a long pause. Then from the swirling core of the vault, a glyph bloomed into existence, an ancient sigil, thrumming with energy. The translation pulsed into their minds simultaneously. The anomaly becomes the key. The queen survives by the hand of the outsider. Cade looked down at his still bandaged hand. Wow. Talk about pressure. The archivist floated back, dimming. Approval given, but danger remains. The future is fluid, and not all rivers run kind. That's so reassuring, Cade muttered. As they exited the vault, Seraphine walked beside him in silence. Then, without warning, she reached out and took his hand. He looked over, startled. You okay? She nodded once. The Codex approves. The court has to stand down, for now. But I'm not foolish enough to believe this is the end. Our enemies aren't vanquished, just quiet. Cade squeezed her fingers. I can handle quiet. I'm just not great with the stabbing. Then stay close, she said. I have a feeling we're going to need each other. He chuckled. Good, because I've already bonded mentally, biologically, and psychically. It'd be embarrassing to get dumped after all that. She smiled faintly. You're not getting dumped. Well, that's a relief. I was about to get anomaly tattooed on my arm. Do it, she said. Just make sure it's spelled right. Royal protocol, you understand? As they walked out into the flickering light of twin moons, Cade felt something strange. Not safety exactly, but a sense of momentum, of story. He looked at her again. I want this vampire, he said, grinning. She rolled her eyes. Stop stealing my lines. The coronation began with 6 trumpets, 3 explosions, and one slightly nervous-looking llama-shaped drone that wasn't technically invited, but somehow became a beloved mascot halfway through the procession. Cade watched it from the side of the grand dais, wearing the official consort's attire, which involved more shoulder padding than he thought necessary, and boots so shiny they threatened to blind spectators on the upper balconies. He still wasn't used to the whole royal consort label. It made him sound like a very glamorous side dish. But considering that 2 weeks ago he was dodging psychic daggers and being declared an anomaly by ancient sentient flashlights, he figured things were looking up. Seraphine stood at the center of it all, framed by solar banners and the hovering lenses of galactic press drones. She was radiant, armored not in battle plating, but in ceremonial regalia woven from dark light threads, fabric that shimmered like the space between stars. Her long ears, once hidden for diplomacy, were adorned in tiny glinting solar stones, a proud flare of her lineage. She wore them openly now, unapologetically, like someone who no longer needed to bend to anyone else's expectations. Cade thought she looked dangerous and beautiful, and a little bit like the kind of person who'd kiss you 1 second and lead a planetary invasion the next, which honestly was his type. The crowd roared as the queen's crown, a construct of living metal and compressed nebula mist, descended onto Seraphine's brow. It pulsed once, bonding with her biology, syncing with the rhythm of her heartbeat. The transition of power wasn't just symbolic in their culture. It was literal. The throne recognized her now, fully, uncontested, chosen. The whole palace trembled slightly. Cade wasn't sure if it was ceremonial or just really enthusiastic architecture. When the roar faded and the rituals ended, Seraphine descended from the dais, her long cloak trailing behind like a comet's tail. She came straight to him, eyes narrowed, smirking slightly. You're squinting, she said. Light's too bright. It's your reflection off those boots, isn't it? He looked down. I've blinded 3 nobles already. I might be a diplomatic hazard. She tilted her head. You already were. They walked together into the Hall of Accord, where dignitaries mingled, alliances were toasted, and tiny hors d'oeuvres floated on anti-gravity trays that kept misjudging the floor and drifting slightly to the left. Cade tried one. It exploded in his mouth with the flavor of spicy metal and regret. Why do all your snacks taste like philosophical dilemmas? He asked, coughing. They're designed to heighten neural clarity, Seraphine said. Helps with treaty negotiations. I'd rather take my chances with normal snacks. Maybe something that doesn't threaten my existence in 2 bites. Vorth appeared, his armor still gleaming with the polish of ceremonial combat. He gave Cade a look that suggested he was still mentally placing bets on Cade, tripping into a diplomatic scandal before the evening ended. The system is stabilizing, Vorth said, addressing Seraphine. Intaris's supporters are in retreat. Several have defected. The Codex revelation was decisive. Seraphine gave a slow nod. Good. Keep watch. Even loyalty bought by prophecy has an expiration date. Vorth's eyes shifted to Cade, who offered a chipper thumbs up. I still don't like you, the general muttered. I know, Cade said, but that makes it more fun when I succeed. Vorth walked away before he could respond, probably to go glare at someone with actual power. Later that night, they stood alone on the palace's solar balcony, watching the aurora bloom over the capital city. The energy shield hummed gently above them, shimmering with the occasional flicker of shooting stars. Below, lights danced in the streets, celebrations, parades, hover floats shaped like the royal crest, and one extremely out-of-tune marching band trying its best with alien bagpipes. You know, Cade said, arms folded, it's strange. A month ago, I was raiding your convoy. Then I was in your prison. Then your bed. Now your balcony. You skipped over the arena, she said. Right. The part where I almost died for romance? You've done it twice. I'm a sucker for commitment. She laughed, a genuine low sound that warmed the air around them more than any heating drone. I thought you'd run. I considered it, briefly, but you're kind of hard to forget. She turned to him, something softer behind her eyes. You changed things, Cade. Not just here. Not just for me. For the dynasty. For the people. They're starting to believe in choices again. He shifted awkwardly. I didn't do much. Just got hit a lot. Made bad jokes. Fell in love with a vampire princess. And refused to stop. I'm annoyingly persistent. She leaned closer. It's what I love about you. He blinked. Wait, did you just... Yes. Say it again. No. Come on. I'll say it if you survive the banquet without spilling anything on your tunic. That's cruel. She took his hand. That's love. They stood together in silence as the celebration rolled on, the stars turning lazily above them. Cade thought about everything that had happened. The duels, the prophecy, the strange, impossible gravity of falling for someone who should have been his enemy. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, not just a survivor. He was part of something vast and strange and unexpectedly meaningful. He glanced sideways at Seraphine, her eyes fixed on the horizon like she was already planning the next war or wedding, whichever came first. You know, he said, we never did get a proper first date. She raised an eyebrow. You want one now? Kind of. Maybe something quiet, a little less murdery. I suppose we could take the royal cruiser, park it on the dark side of a moon, watch the binary stars. Sounds nice. Do I get to pick the playlist? No. Worth a shot. She kissed him. Brief, warm, certain. When she pulled away, her eyes sparkled. Let's rewrite the galaxy, she said. And Cade, who had never believed in destiny until she crashed into his life with fangs and fire, just smiled. Together. The end.